The morning sun stretched long fingers of gold across the Wyoming plains, touching every fence post and stirring the cool breath of dawn. At the edge of that endless horizon stood Thomas Brennan, his gloved hands resting on the top rail of the corral fence. The cattle grazed quietly beyond, their silhouettes black against the pale light. To the east, the Double B Ranch spread like a kingdom. 20,000 head of cattle, 500 horses, and a name that commanded respect across 3 counties. It was his father's empire, and soon, whether he wanted it or not, it would be his. A distant rhythm of hoofbeats drew Thomas from his thoughts. He turned as old Jake, the ranch foreman, rode up in a cloud of dust. "Your father wants you," Jake called, pulling his horse to a stop. "Says urgent." Thomas nodded. When Marcus Brennan called, you came. That was the first rule of the Double B. He swung into the saddle of his chestnut gelding Copper and rode toward the main house. It loomed at the heart of the valley, a fortress of timber and stone, built by a man who refused to bow to anyone. Inside, the air smelled of leather, tobacco, and the faint sweetness of old whiskey. Thomas found his father in the study, standing behind an enormous oak desk cluttered with ledgers and maps. The walls bore trophies of elk and buffalo, silent witnesses to Marcus Brennan's victories. The old man's gray eyes, sharp as steel, lifted when Thomas entered. "Sit," Marcus ordered. Thomas obeyed. His father held a letter in his weathered hand. "Do you know what this is?" Marcus asked. "No, sir. It's from Judge Thornton in Cheyenne. The railroad's coming through. We said come changes, big ones. The old handshake deals aren't enough anymore. We need protection, alliances, political power." Thomas stayed quiet. His father didn't like interruptions. July 28, Marcus continued, his tone as hard as the land outside. "It's time you took a wife." Thomas stiffened. "A wife?" "Yes. eBay made arrangements. 5 families are sending their daughters. The Harrisons, Prescotts, Beekmans, Carmichaels, and Sterlings. Each one brings something the ranch needs: rail connections, bank support, water rights, political reach, trade routes. You meet them, choose one, and be married by Christmas." Thomas felt his stomach knot. "And if I refuse?" "Then you can leave," Marcus said flatly. "Start your own spread somewhere without the Brennan name or a single dollar from this ranch." The words struck like a lash. Thomas rose, the weight of generations pressing on his shoulders. "I need time to think." "You have 1 week," Marcus said. "The ranch is bigger than both of us. Remember that." Thomas turned to go, but his father's voice stopped him at the door. "I know where your mind wanders, boy. That stable girl Clara, she's got no family, no dowry, no future. She's not wife material for a Brennan." Thomas' hand tightened on the doorknob. "She's more than that." Marcus' eyes were cold. Pretty faces and kind hearts don't build empires. "Go on, son. Think it over." Outside, the sunlight hit him like a slap. He didn't head back to the range. His feet carried him toward the stables, the only place that had ever felt like peace. The Double B stables were the pride of the ranch, 50 stalls, polished tack, the smell of hay and horses filling the air. Inside, Clara Morrison was working with a young mare that no one else could handle. She moved slow and calm, her voice a low murmur, her touch steady. At 19, Clara had been on the ranch for 6 years, an orphan girl with nothing but a recommendation letter and a willingness to work. Her dress was plain and patched, her hands rough from labor, yet she carried herself with quiet grace. She looked up when Thomas's shadow crossed the doorway. For a moment, neither spoke. "Miss Clara," he said, keeping his tone formal. "Mr. Thomas," she replied softly. "You heard?" he asked. She nodded. "News travels fast. Your father has chosen your future." "He thinks so." Clara stroked the mare's neck. "It's a good thing for the ranch. Estron alliances. Is that what you think?" "I think," she said quietly, "that people like us don't get to think much about Bat's fair. We just do Bat's asked." Her voice was steady, but he saw the tension in her shoulders. "You should go," she added, glancing toward the open doors. people might talk. Let them. She turned then, eyes meeting his, brown, steady, and filled with the kind of sadness that comes from knowing how the world works. You can say that because you're Marcus Brennan's son. I'm just the girl who mucks out stalls. We live in different worlds, Thomas. We always have. A step closer. That don't mean. Yes, she cut in it does. She brushed past him, smelling of hay and sunlight. He wanted to stop her, to say everything he'd swallowed for years, but the words stayed trapped. I haven't chosen anyone yet, he called after her. At the door, she paused, her silhouette framed in the afternoon glare. You will, she said softly. You have to. The double B needs you too. When she was gone, the stable felt too quiet. Outside, the wind rose, swirling dust across the yard. Thomas leaned against the stall, the weight of his father's empire heavy on his chest. Cold love survive under that kind of weight? Cold day. As the sun sank behind the mountains, the ranch glowed in gold and shadow. Somewhere out there, his father was planning alliances. And somewhere closer, a stable girl in rags was tending horses by lantern light, never dreaming she'd just become part of a battle between duty and desire that would change both their lives forever. The dawn came soft over the double B, painting the world in pearl and copper. The ranch was already awake, men heading out to the range, the clang of buckets, the bark of orders drifting across the yard. And among it all moved Clara Morrison, quiet and steady as always, her braid brushing against her shoulders as she worked through the morning chores. She had learned long ago that work was the only thing that dulled the ache of what might have been. Each stall cleaned, each horse fed, each saddle checked. They kept her hands busy and her heart safe. Still, when she looked toward the main house, a flicker of unease stirred in her chest. 1 week. That's what Marcus Brennan had said. 1 week until the 5 families arrived, bringing their daughters for the rancher's son to choose from. She told herself it didn't matter. Thomas Brennan was kind, yes, but kindness was not a promise. And she knew where kindness ended when it met family duty. The sound of boots on hay made her glance up. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. You're up early, came Thomas' voice. You've been up since before sunrise, she said, not looking at him. Horses don't feed themselves. A step closer and she could feel the warmth of him even through the cool morning air. About yesterday. There is nothing to say, she said, moving to the next stall, her voice brisk. You have your duty. I have mine. It don't have to be that way. She turned to face him, eyes steady, voice calm. Don't it? Tell me, Thomas, what happens if you refuse your father? If you choose someone like me? He opened his mouth but said nothing, and in his silence lay every answer they feared. Clara gave a small sad smile. That's what I thought. She went back to her work, spreading clean straw with practiced motions. We both know how this story ends. You pick one of those fine ladies. You'll build the future your father wants, and I'll still be here doing what I do best, working hard and keeping my head down. You make it sound simple. It is simple, she said quietly, just not easy. She paused, leaning on the pitchfork. Do you remember when I first came here? Of course, he said. You were 16, scared half to death. I was, she admitted. The mission school taught me reading and manners, but not how to handle horses or men like your father. She laughed softly. Jake found me crying behind the grain shed that first week. I remember, Thomas said. I sat with you there until you stopped shaking. 6 years ago, she murmured. Feels like another lifetime. Outside, the ranch hands called to one another, the world still moving while their words hung between them. Clara straightened, brushing straw from her dress. You should go, Thomas. The man will notice. I don't care. Hizo. Her voice was firm again. People talk, and talk can ruin a woman faster than the truth ever could. Before he could answer, voices echoed from the yard. Riders returning from the far pasture. Hack and the hands drove in a group of horses, their hooves drumming like thunder. Clara stepped outside, slipping easily back into her work. She greeted the men, guided the animals into the corral, and within minutes had order out of chaos. Thomas watched her, admiration written plain on his face. "She's got a gift," one of the men muttered. "Ha que nadie. That girl was born to gentle wild things." Thomas said nothing. He knew they weren't just talking about horses. Later, as the sun climbed higher, he found her again. She was brushing down a restless colt, her hand steady on the animal's trembling flank. "You never stop," he said. She didn't look up. "There is always work to do." He hesitated, then reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers left a smudge of dust behind. For a moment, she froze, caught between wanting to pull away and wanting to stay still forever. Then voices approached, his father's voice among them. Clara stepped back quickly, her face turned away. Marcus Brennan entered the stable with 2 cattle buyers. His sharp eyes took in the scene. His son, the stable girl, the careful space between them that hadn't been there seconds before. "Thomas," Marcus said evenly. "You re-needed in the study." "Yes, sir." Thomas nodded to Clara. "Miss Morrison." "Sir," she said softly, bowing her head. As they left, Marcus spoke to one of the buyers. "Best investment we ever made. That girl keeps the horses worth twice what we pay her." Thomas said nothing. The word investment twisted something inside him. That evening, after hours of business talk and supper filled with silence, Thomas found himself walking toward the stables again. The lamps glowed through the slats, warm and familiar. Inside, Clara was working with a young filly, teaching her to accept the saddle. The rhythm of her movements was slow and patient, her voice a whisper of calm. "You shouldn't be out here," he said softly. She didn't startle. She always seemed to know when he was near. "Mrs. Rodriguez said I porty like a farmhand, so I came back to where I belong." He smiled sadly. "You belong more than anyone. They're beautiful, you know," she said quietly. "All those women dressed like they stepped out of a dream. They're strangers." She looked at him now, tired but steady. "So was your mother once. And she learned to love your father." Thomas took a step closer. "And what if I can't learn to love anyone else?" Her voice trembled. "Then you'll lose everything." He shook his head. "Losing you. That's everything." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The world outside the stable faded. The laughter, the deals, the expectations. Only the sound of horses and their breathing filled the silence. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't say that." But he couldn't stop. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. His fingers closed around hers with respect, warm and steady. They stood like that, the lantern light flickering between them, the weight of unspoken things pressing close but held back by honor. The music of the harvest dance still echoed in her memory, but here, in the quiet stable, something deeper was taking root,